Hello, this is Skylit Lake reading Long Night in the Valley by Moraleus. Chapter 14. It's Bakugo. Old Bakugo, said Todoroki. I don't know, said Uraraka. He hasn't sworn at us. Wish fulfillment, old Bakugo, corrected Todoroki. First contact, said two voices. Aizawa could recognize one as belonging to two. Stop comparing me to that exploding brat, snapped two. He returned his attention to Midoriya. I don't agree with your philosophy, he said, but this isn't the time or place. Midoriya nodded, even as he swayed in place, the edge of his body fuzzy. Your idea will work. 8 can take him. What are you talking about? Asked Aizawa. 9 here just ran into that fire user. Darby, supplied Midoriya, voice thin. Thank you for letting me use your quirk, Sensei. Any time, said Aizawa. Is there anything we can do? Asked Uraraka. Stay back and don't distract him, said 2. I'd send you ahead to 1, but I need to give him my power if he wants his ridiculous escape plan to work. He crossed his hands. Focus 9. The thing was, Darby relied on his quirk to the exclusion of everything else, which was fine. It was a powerful quirk, and his body really wasn't up to quirkless fighting, seeing as it was literally stapled together. But there was a reason he had not faced Aizawa himself in the training camp, but instead had delegated that task to one of Twice's duplicates. No matter how much his quirk hurt him, no matter how much it reminded him of that man and that time, he did not fare well in fights without it. Toshinori and Izuku had picked up on this, and thanks to the joys of partial telepathy and haunted quirks, had managed to come up with a plan. It was, if Izuku was being honest, a terrible plan, but Izuku and Toshinori were both injured and exhausted, and it was the best they could come up with. Izuku would hang back and cancel Darby's quirk, while Toshinori beat him up to a pulp. The division of labor was decided upon through the observation that Toshinori had much greater experience in beating people to pulp, and that Izuku probably wouldn't be able to focus on using Aizawa's quirk and fighting at the same time. But Izuku worried. Toshinori had been under so much strain today. His body was in just as bad a shape as Darby's. Izuku blinked. So don't blink. What a comforting consensus from the peanut gallery in the back of his head. Nana chuckled, but she sounded strained. Not much we can do for you right now, kiddo. Toshinori was prepared to fight dirty. As a hero and symbol of peace, he often faced with the expectations that his fights be clean, straightforward affairs. Usually, he complied with the expectations. Few people could match his strength. Few enemies stood up again, or kept fighting after he knocked them back once. For those enemies who could match him, relatively clean fights were often still the best option to defeat them. But there had been several exceptions, All for One being the chief among them. Toshinori could fight dirty. It was a skill he knew better than to let lapse. He knew how much old injuries could hurt, and he had no scruple against going after them. Any weak point was fair game. This wasn't even beginning to mention the others, still whispering in the back of his mind, who had maintained the thin line between the light of hope and the darkness of despair for so many years. His fist impacted the line of Darby's medical staples. Toshinori felt some bite into his knuckles, felt Darby's skin tear around him. The man, the boy really, he couldn't be more than a handful of years older than Izuku, reeled back, shaking his hand as if he couldn't quite believe his quirk was gone. Then he looked up at Izuku, and Toshinori could give him this. At least he caught on fast. He snapped an arm out, clotheslining Darby before he could pass him and attack Izuku. Darby hit the ground. Toshinori tried to follow up his advantage with a sharp kick to the head. But even with as much experience as Toshinori had, Darby was younger and sprier. He recovered quickly, retaliating with comparatively clumsy but strong fists. Toshinori was very aware of the time limit he was on. How long had Izuku kept his eyes open already? Aizawa could only keep his version of the quirk going for a few minutes. He knew when Izuku started to waver, the concerns of the past users going clear and sharp in the back of his head. Darby's hands burst into flames. "Toya!" shouted Izuku. The man whipped his head around, apparently forgetting that Toshinori was even there. "We saw your hair dye, you drama queen." Toshinori grabbed the side of Darby's head and tried to slam it into his knee, but Darby pulled free. They were both breathing heavily now, but Izuku had his eyes back open and fixed on Darby. Toshinori doubted they'd be lucky to distract Darby again. The others slid into place in his mind, their experiences neatly complementing his own. They needed to finish it before Izuku had to blink again. They raised their fists. "Visit your mum, you loser!" They closed in. "At least tell the police what happened to you, so they can get your siblings out." So it turned out Izuku did have something else to contribute to the fight. "Please repeat what you just told me earlier, HPSC President." The hapless liaison with the DNA testing center flinched, then hid the flinch behind a cough. "Well," he said, "our technicians ran Midoriya's DNA through a number of databases, and Midoriya is related to the Scourger Camino. But, I think it's best if I let her explain the rest." He stepped out of view of the camera. The coward. The technician waved at the camera. "Hi, so I guess the first weird thing about the sample you gave me was how contaminated it was. There were, almost a dozen different people's worth of DNA in the sample you gave me, which usually Hawks is better than that. But then I remembered Nomu's DNA and the Scourger's DNA, so in retrospect... Anyway, I sort of ran them all through our databases." "Which database?" interrupted Mr. Brave. "The Commission's one, the police ones, the public ancestry ones?" "All of them," said the technician. "I ran them through all the old ones too, because the Scourge of Camino is supposed to be over 100 years old, isn't he? I'm kinda surprised he wasn't run through the old database himself earlier. You could have closed dozens of cases." "Get on with it," hissed the off-screen commission liaison. "But I ran them through and, one of them was All Might's." A whisper ran through the room. "He stole All Might's quirk?" asked one hero, traumatized. "I don't know," said the technician, nervously. "I mean, All Might was there, so it could have just been contaminated in the normal way. But, no, I'll come back to All Might's DNA in a bit. Then there were 3 other heroes' DNA, Skyrunner, Fidelity, and Lariat." "We'll have to assume he has their quirks too," said the commission president grimly, for the benefit of the assembled heroes. "Continue." "Another matched to the Vigilante forewarning. Then one matched to what was labeled as a 99 surety DNA sequence from Tempest." "My God," said Mr. Brave. "Then there were some sequences that matched samples taken from the scene of various crimes and terrorist actions, but are otherwise unknown. That left 2 DNA samples that could be Midoriya's, assuming he isn't over 100 years old. They both matched as relatives to the Scourge of Criminals. What kind of relatives? One was rather distant, and actually had the least DNA present out of all the other strands. The closest possible relation would be half-brother, although cousins might be possible. The other was a parent-to-child relation, and the most present DNA, so I would assume that one belongs to Midoriya. The thing is, she trailed off. We don't have all day. The thing is, all of the different people I mentioned also are related to the Scourge of Criminals. Silence. Excuse me? Said Mount Lady, raising a hand. Did he say all of them, like including All Might, yes, though he probably more like a great-grandson or something along those lines, said the technician. Once you get more than a generation or 2, it's hard to tell, because the ratios of what you get from your grandparents aren't even. Do you have anything more to add? Yeah. After running them through the database, well, there are dozens of active heroes that are at least loosely related to either them or the Scourge of Camino, not to mention villains, common criminals, and civilians who had to register their DNA for one reason or another. And the Shihai cell line, the one that replaced the healer line in almost every drug trial after the quirked population got majority status. That's a perfect match. She laughed, clearly on the edge of hysteria. I mean, I don't know what we expected. He's over a century old. Of course he's going to have kids and family members, and he's clearly into shady medical research. Wouldn't put it past him to have donated sperm banks the sick. The commission president muted the technician. You see, he told the heroes, why we must act to contain and neutralize Midoriya Izuku as a threat as soon as possible. So many heroes being related to a supervillain like a Scourge of Camino would damage the confidence in the hero system, perhaps irreparably. Are any of us? I don't think that's relevant right now, do you? Asked the commission president smoothly. What is relevant is ensuring that Midoriya's DNA family tree never gets into public hands. He fell quiet, scanning the heroes with dark eyes. Regardless of whether or not any of you could find yourselves in it, the fact of the matter is that ensuing investigations would lay bare other things you may not wish to come to light. He cleared his throat. Now, Hawks is putting together a team to track down the League of Villains. In light of recent revelations, we believe they have been working closely with Midoriya. Maybe you can use my quirk, said Shoto. If you're fighting Darby, Ice would be a perfect counter. Midoriya shook his head. You're not related. Can't. What? Chu sighed. The trick he did with your teacher's quirk only works on people related to him. Shoto blinked, then turned to look at Aizawa. Sensei. Absolutely not, said Ida loudly. You don't know what I was going to say, protested Shoto. You can't ask people if they have secret love children. It's improper. Let us simply wait quietly like, I'm not sure we caught your name, sir. No, you didn't, said Tu. In any case, let us wait quietly, said Ida, not one to be easily put out. I'm related to Midoriya, asked Aizawa in tones approaching despair. You are, said Tu. I think you're related to one of my younger siblings, like Sixes, possibly to the Shimuras as well, given the secondary portion of your quirk. So, said Shota, the gears in his brain turning. Midoriya is related to all of you? Some more distantly than others, but yes. So, he's based off relatives and people he knew in real life. Tu sighed heavily. Look, that was an obvious lie. Six only bothered with it because of that government bastard crawling around. Midoriya had been right. Shoto's conspiracy theories could be used as an interrogation technique. Then what's the truth? Asked Shoto. Or are you just embarrassed like Midoriya is about how All Might is clearly his father? Midoriya made a very distressed sound, and Shoto realized that maybe this wasn't the time. You have no room to talk when the pyromaniac currently trying to roast 8 is your older brother, you peppermint-styled weirdo. You really are like Bakugo. Do you have a death wish or something? Can you guys not? This is hard, said Midoriya. Then he gasped and fell to his knees. He got him, oh my gosh. He took a breath. My eyes. Luckily, you won't need them for this, said Tu, kneeling in front of Midoriya. In the movement, I was called Shadow Dragon. One came up with a name. He named my quirk too, Perception Filter. Wanted to name it Chameleon Circuit for a while, but that made no sense. He was such a nerd. He still is a nerd. Yeah, panted Midoriya. I guess that isn't a surprise. He used old manga to support his arguments with... No, it doesn't make it any better that you only used that argument once. I mean, surely, I'd probably have made the same. Focus 9, said Tu, snapping his fingers in front of Midoriya's face. Shoto stepped forward. It's okay, Todoroki, said Midoriya. I'm just... How did it work? The perception filter? No idea. We didn't have fancy tests and doctors on hand to figure out the mechanics, but I can tell you what I did. When it first came in, Midoriya nodded at this, as he heard something in the sentence that Shoto was missing. I could disappear from the senses of one targeted person, along with anything I carry. Sight, hearing, smell. That last will be the important one for you. Gigantomachia, said Midoriya, nodding again. Exactly. Later, I was able to affect more people at a time. My range grew. The fewer people I was hiding from, the farther I could reach. Up to about a mile. Sometimes I could draw attention towards myself too, although I could never keep it up for long. Activation? Asked Midoriya. Don't think too hard about it being hidden. You're blending in, part of the scenery. No ripples on the surface of the pond. A shadow inside the shadow. Okay, said Midoriya. I think I got it. Were you able to hide other people with you? Otherwise... Sometimes I thought I did. When 3 and I worked together, we were always luckier than we should have been, and there were some incidents with cars. But it never happened in a way I could test. Your best bet is just carrying 8. Right, okay, I'll try that. Izuku, you can barely open your eyes, or stand up. You aren't going to carry me. But you said... Toshinori frowned deeply, and hoped that Tu got the message. Just focus on yourself right now, alright? Gigantomachia will be looking for you first, not me. We've always been thankful Gigantomachia isn't the brightest of All for One's minions, even if he is one of the most annoying. I don't know if annoying is the word I'd use. Toshinori blinked and shook his head. You're shaking, he said. I'm okay, said Izuku, trying to get up. Too many quirks at once. Toshinori put his hands on Izuku's shoulders, silently telling him to stay down. What a time to forget where he had packed the blankets, although he looked back at where he propped Darby unconscious up against a tree. Darby seemed to have a cold resistance vestigial mutation, although how Toshinori knew that was a mystery for another day. One probably connected with how One for All manifested in Izuku, and he was a fire quirk user. He didn't really need the jacket. Besides, Toshinori was a villain now. Sort of. As he and Izuku had discussed earlier, villains were veritable bastions of pettiness. He stole Darby's coat and wrapped it around Izuku's shoulders. Miles away, trying to coordinate heroes over a call. Hawks lost contact with one of his feathers, specifically the one he had hidden in Darby's coat. He did not frown, twitch, stutter, or otherwise falter. He did, however, curse internally, using words he suspected the Hero Commission would have liked him to never have learned. Darby must have found the feather and destroyed it. Hawks had thought he had hidden it better than that. This was going to be a pain to explain. Gigantomachia paused for a second, then with a howl redoubled his attacks. "Can anyone tell what he's screaming about?" demanded Tomura. "No idea," said Toga, her cheerfulness more than a little ragged. "Hey boss," said Twice, "if I had made double of this guy, do you think they'd fight each other or... Dear God, who in their right mind would want two of these things running around?" "Little Lord," wailed Machia, "where did you go?" "Say, Shigaraki," said Mr. Compress, narrowly dodging a boulder. "You don't think he's, referring to the little green-haired, white-haired, or you know what I mean?" Yeah, Tomura did, actually, which meant the brat, who might be Sensei's brat, don't think about it, was around here somewhere, and they'd miss him. Like everything else about this situation, Tomura had mixed feelings about this. So maybe if the boy and the giant are acquainted, the mother... Do you idiots have a death wish? You don't want to fight two bosses at once unless you want to be pancaked. I was thinking she could perhaps calm the giant. Yeah, right, before they team up to kill us. What part of this are you not get it? Mr. Compress didn't quite manage to dodge and was catapulted into one of the few nearby trees that was still standing. As he lost consciousness, all the various marbles in his pockets ballooned and broke, disgorging their contents. This meant that Tomura had to rescue Midoriya Izuku from being crushed between an entire bus-stop shelter. Why, Compress, why? And several logs. Because if there was even a chance that she was Sensei's wife, Tomura didn't fancy his chances at staying alive if she was unalived in his general vicinity. Tomura was in no way a goody-two-shoes hero student, had never trained himself to safely save people, and had a quirk that literally destroyed everything he touched. This went far from perfectly. At least Midoriya seemed unharmed. "Ah," she said. "My shirt." She shifted slightly. "And my bra." There was an utter rage from Gigantomachia, and Tomura contemplated just letting Machia kill him. Surely being stomped flat by a man taller than most 5-story buildings would be less painful than whatever Sensei would come up with. "Oh my, Machia, is that you?" asked Midoriya Izuku, quite calmly, as if she weren't standing half-naked in the middle of a battlefield in winter. "It's been forever." "Mrs. Lord!" shouted Machia, his eyes tearing up. "I'm so sorry, I lost Little Lord." "Oh, really? He was here then." Her eyes were glittering. "I'm sure he couldn't have gone too far. If we walk around a bit, I'm sure he'll hear us calling. In the meantime, perhaps you can explain to me what exactly you do for my husband. Your role in his business seems to have been downplayed." "Is that better?" asked Toshinori. Izuku nodded tiredly. Despite Chu's instructions, he couldn't keep up the perception filter and, well, do anything else, really. Toshinori wasn't much better. Izuku could tell, through one for all, that he was also on his last legs. "Alright, let's keep going the way we were before," said Toshinori, pulling Izuku up. "Got to get out of Gigantomachia's range so you can sleep." He did not say that reaching the Wild Pussycats camp was now out of the question, with how beaten up they were. They'd be sleeping outside tonight. Hopefully, they had enough clothes and blankets. Izuku shuddered at the pounding sensation in his head increasing. "I'm sure it will be fine," Toshinori said, guiding Izuku with a hand on his back. "Good job, my boy. You have the briefcase." Toshinori kept muttering encouragements. Izuku really wasn't paying attention, which made him feel terrible, but he had to keep perception filter going. He had to keep going, just a little bit more. Aizawa-sensei and his friends were almost to one. One would get them out before he broke through. He just had to hold on until then. Midoriya's form flickered and then faded. Chu sighed. "Is he alright?" asked Aizawa. "Is he safe?" "As safe as he can be, wandering through a forest filled with All For One's minions while the government tries to track him down in the middle of winter," replied Chu. "Which isn't very safe, speaking from experience. Come on, let's go." Chu walked out the hole in the wall, not waiting to see if Aizawa or any of the kids followed. "You're calling Yagi 8 now?" asked Aizawa. "That's his number. Yeah, hurry up." Yagi, not Yagi's impression, his copy in Midoriya's mind. Chu didn't answer. "You aren't impressions or copies at all, are you? You're real people somewhere that Midoriya is connected to. Why pretend otherwise?" Some of the others thought 9 could fix things with the government if they didn't know what was really going on. Thought it would be worth it. So stupid after everything. They walked through the compound gate and into the living room. "It seems awfully contrived though. Why try be dead heroes? Why pick people like Skyrunner and Fidelity to impersonate?" Chu snorted. "They weren't impersonating anyone. They really are Skyrunner and Fidelity. Except for 8 and 9, we're all dead. Otherwise, we would have finished this by now. 8 almost did, all on his own." They turned a corner. 2 young children played in the bedroom while a teen watched on. One child was obviously a younger version of Chu. The hair was distinctive. The other had a short curtain of white hair. He had an action figure that they were playing with, although Aizawa didn't recognize who they were. "First contact," said a single young voice. The face of the teen against the wall was scribbled out as if it was with a marker. "Don't look too closely at that one," said Chu. "Who is that?" "All For One. I suppose you call him Scourge of Camino." "He's your older brother," said Todoroki, his eyebrows raised into his hairline. "Don't be disgusting. Biologically speaking, he was my cousin." "Oh no," thought Aizawa. "Don't tell me. Is he the one you have locked away? The one you don't want to count among your number?" Chu sighed. "Are you doing that instead of swearing?" asked Todoroki. "The sign, I mean." "I told you to stop comparing me to the explosion brat. Chu hissed, then frowned. Something's not right. "What is?" "This isn't a safe memory. Just a quick one. One should have been here to pick you up by now." "What do you mean it isn't safe? No matter how impressed we are, it's only a memory, isn't it?" "You did hear the part where he's breaking in, didn't you? And the part where we're all real people? Or are those glasses just for show?" barked Chu. "The real All For One is trying to break into Midoriya's mind," said Aizawa. Wait, said Uraka. "But, Izuku, that wouldn't mean that the commission was right." "Of course not. 9 would have probably cut off all his limbs before betraying his friends. Even if I don't agree with him and think he shouldn't, I can see why he would do that." "But where's 1? "Why are you telling us this?" asked Aizawa. "You told us why the others didn't, but you have no reason to say anything yourself, do you?" Chu turned slightly to gaze at Aizawa out of the corner of his eye. "As long as we're waiting, I might as well collect as much information as possible, right?" "It's insurance," said Chu. "Finally, it's hard to see how this will turn out. 8 wants to take 9 out of the country, but even if that works, All for One will still be here. Someone else needs at least to have an understanding. I want 9 to do well, but I don't want this on him. He's a kid, so are you. He looked at the students, then back at Aizawa. You're all kids. If I can get someone else to take care of this for him, while he and 8 are somewhere safe. All for One is in Tartarus, said Aizawa. You think something like that is going to stop him? I'm not entirely sure death could stop him. It didn't stop us, and he's at least as stubborn. Well, wasn't this an impossibly heavy weight to set on Aizawa's shoulder? I have no sympathy, you lazy caterpillar lookalike. You're an adult, aren't you? Get help if you can't do it yourself. If I find out you pushed it onto the children, I'll kill you. Wow, he's secretly soft too, just like Bakugo, said Todoroki. Are you sure you're not related? There is legitimately something wrong with you, do you? The hinges on the vault snapped. The door crumpled outwards. Another well-placed kick sent the door tumbling outward with a crash. Shaking his hands, All for One stepped into the mindscape and smiled. Well, he said, dragging his gaze over the assembled one-for-all users, his sworn enemies, and the closest thing he had to family. Isn't this a lovely little reunion? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry again about the background noise. I'm recording this in the day, not my usual night, since I have guests over and they're sleeping in my room as well. So it's been hard to record my videos, and my bird is just being really loud all of a sudden. But either way, this is a lore-heavy chapter with we're seeing how they're all related, which is really confusing. I think the last chapter was more clear on how they were related and stuff, but Ian saying that it was hard to, piece all the parts together. It's also not climactic, it's a cliffhanger with All for One just busting through the door and saying, yep, I'm here. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!